Hey, you are listening to Oh Crap Parenting with me, your host, Jamie Glowacki. This is a podcast for conscious parents who drop the F-bomb a lot. Welcome. Before I begin, I just want to give the caveat that I still have a very lingering, very slight lingering cough from my sickness, more like a frog in my throat. And it seems to be exacerbated when I talk a lot. So podcasting is not my friend right now. However, I will do my best, but please forgive my frog if it happens. So today I want to talk about how we are messing up parenting, all of us. I am caught in this confluence of I'm being inundated all around me with research and data proving two huge points in how we are literally messing it up. And definitely it's Gen Z. So a lot of you guys have the kids that now are known as Gen Alpha, but the Gen Z, so that includes like Pascal's age. I forget the exact dates, but they're a little older than your kids, right? But they are more anxious, more depressed, more helpless, more scared to take risks, less likely to ever move out of their parents' house. They have to bring their parents to job interviews. We're raising a helpless generation. And I've really sat on this because I think a lot of the Gen Z kids are being raised by Gen Xers, myself included. And we talk a good game of like, the Gen X is the last generation that will straddle pre-internet and internet, and maybe some older millennials, but older millennials, I think would have had internet. So it's a wild generation. And we, I'm sure you've all seen it on social media. We pride ourselves on like, we drank water out of a rusty garden hose. Our moms kicked us out of the house. We were the generation of benign neglect. And we're pretty proud of that. Like we came out resilient, but we were neglected, and we were the first generation to have rampant divorce. We were latchkey kids. We, in general, I'd say it was pretty benign neglect. And so we are the ones guilty of overparenting. So I have been really sucked into, I'm bouncing between many books right now that I've read all of them, but I keep going back because they're so fascinating. And the concepts they so resonate with me because I feel like I've always been a combination of old school and new school. I've always said that, right? Like I got some old school stuff going on for parenting, but I also, there's new school stuff, right? Where we validate feelings. And I myself have been pulled kind of that pendulum, the gentle parenting, for lack of a better term, right? into this like giving too much credence to feelings, to stopping the entire household for feelings, right? And I've always tried to temper that with even like the go to your room strategy, these sort of more old school thoughts that like you don't get to have big feelings and wreck the whole house, right? But we do acknowledge that you have big feelings. When I was growing up, that wasn't even acknowledged. Stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about was a very common phrase. So the books I'm bouncing between is number one, Hunt, Gather, Parent, which we are doing a book club in the Oh Crap Cafe. So if you want to join that, I'll put a link in the show notes. Abigail Schreier, her book is Bad Therapy. Jonathan Haidt, his book is The Anxious Generation. Jen Twenge, who wrote iGen, like I Generation. And Peter Gray, of course, who I had on the podcast. And I am trying to get all these authors on the podcast because they come armed with the data, the research, and it is undisputable that there are two main ways we are completely messing up parenting. One, for sure, is smartphones. So for you guys who have, littles, you're not dealing with smartphones yet, right? Or, having them in your possession, there's many strategies, but a reigning strategy seems to be to get your community, your school to be really vocal in the PTA so that you have pledges of like no phone till, I think the recommended age is 14. And then the recommended age for social media is 16. So the problem with phone use and social media is that most parents know that their kids are having a problem with it. It is crushing, particularly for girls. And it is sucking them into a virtual world, and they're not making the in-person connections. They're not having the in-person conversations. They're not working things out. You know how social media works. You can post and ghost. You can say something awful and then disappear. It's not the same way in real life. Now, I'm giving a huge summary here, like a broad strokes. All of these books go into so much more detail, but it's something to think about, especially for you guys with the preteens, because in all of these authors mentioned, one of the things is no parent loves it, but they feel like their kid will be a social pariah without it because everybody else has it. And so many things are being talked about and planned. So it really does take a pledge. And I know schools in Rhode Island have done this where, no phones go to school, or they get put in those, I've seen them at shows, like at comedy shows, they have these pockets so the schools can buy those pockets, or they can just go into the principal's office or something, but no phones during school. And if you have a community, if there can be a pledge amongst parents of like, let's get together and nobody gets a phone until they're at this age. We've also talked about in past episodes, there are options. You can get a flip phone. If you're worried about your child's safety, if you're worried about them being able to communicate with you, there are options. There's like the Gab Watch. There's there's a phone called the Lite version. And then you can just get an old fashioned flip phone, which makes it, no internet. And so that is, one of the best things you can do. But what I really want to talk about today is the second thing that we're doing. We are over-parenting by interfering way too much. And I kind of talked about this a little bit in the siblings episode, but we are incapacitating our kids by intervening on their behalf all the time. Kids have to work things out. And sometimes that means fighting. Sometimes that means mean things are going to be said and thrown around. Sometimes it means one kid is going to be left out because they're kind of being a jerk. And all of these authors have said this is the reigning factor why kids are so anxious and depressed. And guys, the numbers are fucking scary. 22% of high school students have seriously considered suicide. 10% have attempted. From 2007 to 2021, suicide rates from 10-year-old to 24-year-old, 10-year-olds to 24-year-olds rose 62%. Depression and anxiety has tripled in the last 2 years. It is insane. These kids are totally depressed, totally anxious, to the point of considering suicide. And the best thing we can do for them is to leave them alone a lot more, to figure things out, to meet in real life, to play in person. And the more we can do that, and again, I'm not saying this is going to be easy. Organized sports is doing a number. There are so many factors, but the biggest one is if parents can get together with parents, create neighborhood play, letting kids walk to school if it's, within a reasonable distance, letting kids cross busy streets on their own. And it's funny because I've heard from so many parents, well, what about safety? Yeah, it's a scary world, but it's actually not as scary as the online world. And when kids are in gangs, nobody's messing with a gang of kids. Nobody. That's a pain in the ass. There's not a kidnapper on the planet. Never mind that stranger kidnapping is so rare, but there's not a stranger on the planet who's going to mess with a gaggle of kids. That's just a pain in the ass, right? So kids keep each other safe. So try to find your neighbors, find your community, and you have to kind of band together. And it takes honest conversation. It takes, it takes some work. It's not going to come easy. It's not just going to float by your window. You may have to be really proactive about it, but the research is so clear that kids need to be together and get into trouble and get out of trouble. They need to figure out their own difficulties. They need to not be in therapy for every little thing. Yes, certainly I know there's kids with, diagnostic issues for sure, but what's happening, and Abigail Schreier writes about this in Bad Therapy, is parents are sending their kids to therapy for everything. For, when your cat dies or when you lose a grandparent. And these are just life events. And what's happening is if we intervene on our kids' behalf every single time, like think of all the interactions you have with a kid. You're sitting at the park, the kids are all playing, and you're having a conversation with a couple other moms with a cup of coffee, and oh, she said something mean to me. Oh, he went by me and hit me. I know it wasn't an accident, right? Now kids can do that naturally anyway. They can be picky-uni like that, but we've created a whole generation where kids expect their parents to intervene on every behalf, and the end goal seems to be no pain whatsoever. But the problem is we have to experience pain as humans. And when you experience pain and learn how to deal with that and get over it, you feel confident in yourself, right? I just told this story to a kid the other day. I think by the time I was 15, I had ridden in a police car 5 times. I got myself into plenty of trouble, but I was not getting my mother involved because no way, I would have been so punished. So I figured out how to get out of those situations. So I feel like a very competent adult. There's just about no situation I can't get myself out of, right? Same thing why I do these like Spartan races and these like really hard endurance things, because something I think I can't do, or something I think that maybe I can't do, and then I do, that's how I build self-esteem. That's what makes you core happy, not surface happy. And what we're doing as parents, and I'm in this group too. I'm not letting myself off the hook, but we have created a life of such comfort for our kids that the ideal goal is to never feel anything. But when you don't feel anything, you don't feel the joy either. And so these kids are sinking into depression and anxiety and thinking they can't do it. And again, I know for a lot of you that listen to this podcast, you got 2-year-olds, like you're not dealing with this now, and you do have to intervene, I think, a lot on 2-year-olds' behalf, because, there's a lot of hitting going on. But you really want to watch it, you guys with preteens, that you're not coating your kid in a bubble and overprotecting them in real life. And Jonathan Haidt brings this up several times in his book, which is we're overprotecting our kids in real life and we're underprotecting them online. That the predators are online now. So just bear that in mind. Along with all the other social media shit, the predators are online. They're very rarely in person. And I know we have so much, there's so much going on, like sex trafficking and kidnapping. And it really is very, very rare I hate to put it this way, but sex traffickers really go after people who are neglected. They're going to neighborhoods where kids aren't cared about, where kids nobody's going to look for these kids. Not that I think that's fair, and I don't want those kids sex trafficked either. I'm not like trying to present it like that. But in our communities with a bunch of kids playing outside, it's not a statistical worry. And what's happening to our kids on the other end it's really happening. So it took me a while to even try to bring this up on the podcast, because my mind is blown in so many different directions. And I think this goes back to just a lot of old school parents. And I'll bring it into real life. I was talking with a good friend of mine who happens to follow a lot of my parenting advice. And she and I have been talking a lot about this topic. And she was like, you know what? My instinct has always been to be a little more old school. Like, I can't be attending to feelings all day. I have a job. I keep home. I cook really good food. I keep my kids off screens. Like, I have it enough. Like, do I have to really attend to every feeling my child has and stop and make sure everybody feels good? And so she said, no, I'm going back old school. And she, whenever her 2 boys are fighting, she's like, figure it out. No, don't even come to me. I don't want to hear it. Figure it out. And they're figuring it out. And she's like, we stopped all activities. She brought up this really important point that I think ties into all of this, which is we have to preserve the family unit. And what's happening is we're destroying the family unit with activities. We think we have to have activities. We think our kids need special one-on-one time. If you spend special one-on-one time with each individual child, then that each individual child gets driven to their own activities where they do something special. You sit around and wait for them, right? Then they come home and they're fighting with their siblings. So now you think they need more individual attention. Then they're having meltdowns. And so you give them more individual attention. What are we creating? We're creating an individuality that doesn't serve the family unit. And so my friend was saying that they went back to board games. They stopped most activities. that they're doing chores around the house, that kids love to help. If you start at a very young age, and kids want to mimic adults all the time. Even when they play, what do? We buy them a play kitchen, right? We buy them a play kitchen so they can play house. Guess what we're doing? We're playing house. They can play house with us and have real actual pride and joy in completing tasks around the house. So, but it is really important that you start this young. You can't put your kid in front of YouTube Kids for 3 years and then be like, oh, I'm going to teach you how to do the dishes. They're like, oh, hell no, that's not my job. That's your job. So you do have to start young, and it's a slowing down. Now, when you know me, I'm going to reverse engineer it, right? So parents will say, I don't have time. Like dinner's rushed. Everything's rushed. We have to get out for swim lessons. So then maybe it's time to not do the swim lessons. And so that's what my friend was saying. She said, we gave up all the activities. We slowed down. They're helping around the house and they're playing and they're figuring shit out, and everybody is happier. And her kids were having cranky behaviors. All kids are going to have cranky behaviors. They're not going to be angels. This isn't a magical solution. But she said her life is so peaceful now and so slow and so much better. And I think what happened in a generation is we recognized our parents were not the best parents. So number one, we threw out, I've talked about this before, right? We threw out the baby with the bathwater. We don't take any of their advice because we don't like how they were how we were parented. And then what happened is we created a generation of kids that we were like, okay, I'm going to do this better, but we took it too far. Yeah. And so I'm like stumbling over my own mind right now because it's mind blowing. But I think all of us have doubted our intuition because we think we might be being authoritarian, yes, not authoritative. Authoritative is loving, firm boundaries, acknowledge feelings, but feelings aren't facts. Just because you have a feeling doesn't mean things go your way. We don't give in, right? Authoritarian is I don't give a shit. I'm going to give you something to cry about, right? So we are so afraid of being that. But I think a lot of us do have the instinct of why are we so tired? Because we're attending to feelings all day long, because we think everybody needs individual attention. Everybody needs enrichment activities. And so we are making ourselves exhausted, and parenting is not supposed to be this hard. It is the hardest job in the world. Don't get me wrong, but it's not supposed to be this hard and making us so exhausted. And I think what happened is we kind of doubted our intuition about like that kind of old school parenting, because am I being rough? Am I being crazy? And I'm dealing with it now all the time. Even in my potty training clients, I'm like, guys, what happened in the 1940s is and prior to the 1940s is kids weren't even considered human, right? They could be beaten, they could child labor, they could work till midnight. Like nobody gave a shit about kids' feelings. Then we were like, oh, wait a minute, kids do have feelings, right? And so we went that way, and now we've gone too far. And so I'm so excited to talk that I'm losing my mind. So we lost our intuition as to what is, I know what I was going to say. Once we discovered kids are human, now we've taken it too far. And as we pussyfoot around, now I have people who are, their kids will be throwing things at them. Their kids will be, literally looking at them, smiling, peeing on the floor. And they're like, oh, I know when you have the feeling to go pee, you need to sit on the potty. But at some point we stopped treating kids like humans. We decided they were humans and we were going to be kind and loving and not beat them, which is awesome. And then we decided we were going to be extra and not actually have a human response. If your kid looks you in the eye and pees on the floor and smiles, that's them giving you the middle finger. And you don't need to get to the root of that feeling. That requires some oh, what are you doing? Right? What would be the real world response if I peed on your kitchen floor? And so we've put them in such an exalted position that we're not even treating them, we're not having an actual human response, right? When they are being kind of jerks. Kids are going to be jerks. You have to be a jerk to figure out how not to be a jerk. It is not in our nature to be kind. I don't care what anybody says. Our nature is not pleasant. Human nature, we have greed, we have jealousy, we have, a gluttony, we have sloth, we have the 7 sins or something. We are not programmed to just be kind. We will be cranky. We will, hit other kids to get the toy in their hand. When somebody's mean, we might punch them in the face because that's our instinct. And so I think sometimes it does require this like, hey, figure it out. Don't be a jerk. If you're a jerk, nobody's going to like you, right? Instead of this like pussyfooting around parenting that I think has just gone too far. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't think we go back to authoritarian at all. I think you can absolutely, though, sometimes say, you know what? Yeah, they hit you because you were being mean, because you were being a jerk. It's not right that they hit you, but look at your own behavior too, because we're letting kids off the hook. And by letting them off the hook, we're telling them they're not capable. They're not capable of solving their problems. They're not capable of figuring out how to apologize, how to be a jerk and apologize. Look, we've all been jerks, right? What's the best thing you can do? I'm sorry I was a jerk. I realize that now, right? We apologize. But if we constantly intervene, then they're not going to be able to ever solve their own problems. A fascinating thing in Japan, at preschools, they have an area for kids to go where teachers can't see them. That's where the kids go to figure it out. Now, when kids are figuring it out, sometimes there's fighting. Sometimes there's physical altercations. Sometimes, like I said, they're throwing mean words at each other. But it's not something that always needs to be intervened. That's not bullying. It's not something where you, the mom, need to call the other mom, especially if the kids are like over a certain age. I would say over 8 by far, they should be solving their own issues. But if their kids keep coming to us, and this happened, I think, the pandemic really kind of made this a little worse because kids were with adults all day long. There wasn't a lot of peer-to-peer reaction. So like your 4, 5, and 6-year-olds right now, you can see those kids. They're like coming to you for every single thing to solve their problem because they're not used to peer interaction. I hear this from teachers. The kids are not solving their own problems in the classroom or in the playground. Every single kid is coming to the teacher to intervene because they're so used to adult intervention. So anyway, I know this episode was kind of like a jumble, but it's kind of like my warning cry. And I would love for, if you guys join the Oh Crap Cafe, we are going to go through these books. And like I said, I'm going to try to get these authors on because the research is just it's fascinating. And this is, I think, one of the easiest fixes that we could do is let our kids figure shit out, give them more responsibility, more chores around the house, more, employment, more work, even at young ages. So they start to feel resilient. They start to feel confident that they can do things. And that comes from physical strength. That comes from mental strength, right? Emotional strength. And I think that is, and it's going to ease our lives too. I just think I work with so many parents and I've been single the whole time. And I think just intuitively, I just did a mix of old school and new school. And a lot of my work is teaching how to do that, but I can even tell in the time since Pascal was little, and my mom, when Pascal was little, my mom said, God, you guys make this look so hard. Parenting should not be this hard. And I was like, we do. But now I'm watching you guys and I'm like, oh my God, no wonder everybody's exhausted. Like being pulled and being worried about every emotion. And some of parenting, you guys, is just that relentless consistency that I've talked about, right? Like that yes, you're going to have to say something. Your kid's going to whine. They're going to be a whiner for like a year or 2. It's going to be constant. And you're going to have to say over and over again, please use your regular voice. You're singing. I can't hear you when you're whining. You're going to have to say the same things over and over. Siblings are going to fight. You're going to be breaking up fights, till they're 18. But a lot of that can be figured out. A lot of it is not refereeing, intervening, making sure everybody feels good. Sometimes it's being bored. Sometimes it's letting your kid sit with those feelings. And that is one of the reasons I advocate for the go to your room strategy, because it's a way to validate the feeling. You're having a big feeling. I can see that, but we're not giving into that. But you also don't get to wreck the house, and you can have the big feeling over here and just come back when you're ready. And I think in this like gentle parenting, some people say, oh, that's abandoning them. Nobody's ever been abandoned because they're having a tantrum. Like, what am I going to do anyway? Sit around and just watch you watch you have a fit. Now, when they're little, yes, we want to have a lot more grace. Under 2 for sure, because that's just psychotically new to the planet, right? But after 2.5, we have to start socializing and being part of a family, being part of a society, and caring about wrecking other people's day, wrecking other people's ears by screeching, right? So we've kind of lost that, and it's not doing our kids any favors. And what's funny is our kids, I think under like 8, seem so volatile, right? Tantrums and throwing and craziness. But then what ends up happening is this is all manifesting into depression, anxiety, and suicidal ideation in preteen and teen years. So anyway, I'd love to keep this conversation going. Obviously, this is a one-way street as a podcast, and Instagram is so limited with nuance. So again, if you guys want to join the Oh Crap Cafe, these are all ideas that I'm noodling. And again, I find my mind just being, I can't tell you how many times I've listened to these books, and I've listened to these authors on podcasts, and I've listened to episodes like over and over and over again, because I'm like, God, the solution it's right in front of us if we can let go and let kids have more independence, more responsibility, and more independence, responsibility, and that's it, I guess. Yeah. So they can build that grit and resilience and know that they can get through things and handle things themselves. And I see it all around me with Pascal's friends. Even Pascal, I've made his life pretty darn comfortable. And, there are certain ways that I think I have handicapped him. He's better off than most. I'll say that. But even I'll tell you a quick story. So I have a 2010 Tacoma truck, and I have a 2021 Jeep Grand Cherokee. And the truck, I used to have a C-Max, and I don't know if you remember, he hit a raccoon. It was a whole big story. But anyway, the truck is kind of his. It's registered in my name. He didn't have to buy it. His birthday is June 1st, and that's exactly 6 months from December. So I pay his insurance as a birthday present, and I pay his insurance as a Christmas present. And yeah, and so all he's ever really had to do is fill it with gas. I always watch the oil. I always watch the tire pressure, all of that. So, of course, when I got the Grand Cherokee, he wanted that. It's like the matte gray. It's a cool car. So he wants to drive that because the stereo system's better. His friends fit in it. But the truck was his. Now, you're freaking ridiculously lucky to have a whole car at your disposal full time, right? That you're not registering. You don't have to pay insurance, right? So these are things. Now, I've always said, like, I want him to save his money. He's really good with money. So I obviously want to give him a leg up, right? My parents didn't have it. I was broke. I figured it out, but that's a disservice I'm doing him, right? So anyway, the last 3 times, now we mix it up, and the truck has an open bed, of course. And so we have to bring our own trash to the dump. We don't have a trash service. So, some days I'll be like, just take the Jeep, I'll take the truck. And, when he goes to see his friends in this other town, he would ask to take the Jeep. Well, again, they fit better in it. And I was like, yeah, go ahead, take the Jeep. Like it wasn't a thing. But then the last 3 times he brought the Jeep home on empty, didn't fill the gas tank. Then the next time he took the Jeep, left me with the truck was on empty. Like I didn't think I was going to make it to the gas station. And then just the other night he comes home, and he had been gone for the weekend. And I was saying goodnight to him, and he said, Mom, I have to go to the gas station tomorrow. I have to go to the gas station later tonight because the Jeep is on empty. And I was like, all right, make sure you do, because I'm going to do hill work with my friends at 4 a.m. So make sure you go. Yeah. So the next morning I get in the car, and of course, empty. The Jeep's still on empty. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to kill this kid. I was furious, and I very rarely get furious. I've learned to pause. There's not too much that makes me really mad. And I was furious. And thank God I went and did hill work because I wasn't a raging bitch. I was able to regulate myself enough so that when he woke up, and I was almost in tears. I was so mad. And he was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I forgot. And I was like, interesting, because you didn't forget to order certain things off of Amazon last night. You didn't forget, I kind of leaned in, and I was like, listen, you guys, I haven't given him a consequence since he was like 3, because after a certain age, I don't think it's punishments and rewards. I think it's literally like you talk about things, right? And I've been vocal about that on the podcast. I just talk about things. And this, I was like, no. And then I realized, I was like, oh my God, I have done you a huge disservice. I said, you're taking the truck. The truck is yours. You don't know how unbelievably lucky you are just to have that. Like me, my brother, and my sister had to share my mother's car, and she went to work. Like it was a total competition who could get the car. I always got it because I figured out if I cleaned the house and told my mom she looked pretty, I got the car. So, but God, hellfire would have rained down on us if we brought that car back on empty. So I said, you're already good. You've got a car that is registered not in your name. I pay for the registration. That is your car. If you screw yourself with gas, then it's your car. If you don't fill it with gas, no worries. You don't have to tell me you forgot. I'm not going to get mad. You're the one who has to walk to the gas station with the gas can, not me. That's you. I said, you have to watch the oil. Do you even know how to check the oil? You have to watch the tire pressure, because on the truck, the tire pressure light is broken. So like we have to check the tires every once in a while. So I said, this is not only a consequence. I said, you're done with the Jeep. You're not driving my Jeep anymore. No more. That's my car. This is your car. And then as I'm saying it, I'm like, yes, this is a consequence, but also this is a muscle that needs to be flexed. This is something I let go, like trying to give him a little advantage financially, right? Kind of not realizing, sometimes you just don't even think about it till it's a thing. Like it wasn't bothering me either way. I have a car, whatever. But I was like, oh my God, you didn't have to buy a car, so you're not respecting it. You're not respecting me, because I've let it go. Like the last 2 times, I just filled the car that I was in with gas, right? Like there's been no consequence for your actions. And you're going to be 18. You don't even know how to check oil or check the tires or like be in charge of a vehicle. So anyway, just to let you know, like I'm guilty of this too. And this was just, one of the instances where I was like, shit, in trying to like give him a leg up that I didn't have, right? And I wasn't consciously like trying to make up for my childhood. I was just like, yeah, it'd be nice if he goes into manhood with some savings and not, crippled with, no money. And so in trying to do that, I ended up handicapping him. Right. And so I'm glad I saw the light, and I told him, I said, look, it's half consequence, but it's also half a muscle that needs to be flexed here. Like you need to figure this stuff out, because I can't send you into the world not knowing these things. I blew up my first car because nobody told me you had to put oil in a car. I didn't know. I blew a head gasket on the highway because I wasn't taught. So I was like, what am I doing? I'm just like repeating like a different kind of neglect, like a more cushioned neglect. So anyway, I thought you'd enjoy that story and some of our struggles over here in the woods. All right, you guys, as always, I appreciate you. I appreciate you listening. I appreciate you sticking with me for this podcast. I know it was like a lot of disjointed thoughts, but like I said, these books, and I'll put them in the show notes. They're wonderful. And I think, it's just something really to have in your head and to start figuring out, especially guys with young ones, figuring out the phone thing and figuring out how we can bring back the gangs of kids and the in-person. And I got to be honest, I don't know anybody, at least in my son's life, like they'd all rather be in person. They'd all rather be in person than online talking. But we've created worlds where we're like afraid to let them go out, afraid to let them have some freedom, afraid to trust them, to give them responsibility. And then we create a tail-eating snake. Then they don't have the responsibility, right? So it's kind of a kooky thing, but all right, I'm going to let you guys go. As always, rock on and have a beautiful day.
Okay, bye everyone. Just a reminder, if you need additional resources, I have Oh Crap Potty Training. I have Oh Crap, I Have a Toddler. Those books are available everywhere you want to find a book. You can also go to my website, jamieglowacki.com, where you can book private sessions with me, buy any of my courses. Those are really geared towards potty training help. And also I'm on Instagram. I'm not on Facebook anymore, and I'm not on Twitter. I'm on Instagram, jamie.glowacki, and I do a lot of lives and usually posting a lot of good information. So those are extra resources for you. And as always, rock on. Have an awesome day.